You're listening to Malmborg Report, where we discuss the intersection of creativity, work, and the systems in which they are shaped. My guest today is a musician, a very prolific musician, Caleb Morales. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, John. How are you?
I'm doing well. What's been going on in your musical life lately?
Yeah, so I have been working on quite a few projects. I'm in two different bands down here in South Florida. A country band under the tutelage of Gabriel Key, who's a really talented singer-songwriter down here in the country music genre. And Neon Nights, a more collaborative project that's a collective of 5 really great musicians, and we do like pop music. Right now we're running the cover circuit, but we're trying to get into writing some of our own music. And that's all kind of while I'm still releasing 2 songs or a song every 2 weeks, and just trying to break into the sync game. I have a cool story on that.
Yes, I have a little bit of knowledge about that, but I'm curious to hear more. So in terms of what you're doing right now, it seems like you're playing a lot live. How many shows a week are you doing?
It's usually 1 to 2 per weekend. This past month, January, has been really heavy. I had 7 gigs, and February looks a little more normal with about 4, maybe 5 gigs on the agenda. So I try typically to have 1 show per week to have, some funds coming in that helps with the production and engineering of the songs. But I try to leave 1 day every weekend so that I can specifically dedicate it to recording. The months where I'm doing 2 or 3 shows in a weekend really leaves very little time for recording, which is really what I love to do.
Yeah, that is the balance of being a live act is,
Definitely
working on the originals and recording. It's very interesting how you've got the 5-piece band. Right now, you are doing the cover scene because, that's definitely an in-demand live opportunity. Mm-hmm. But there is something special about musicians playing live together over time, that even if your repertoire at that time is not necessarily what you're going to do in the long run, you kind of create this like band synergy.
Yeah, and a sound. It's interesting. I've written so many songs, especially over the last couple of years. And our guitarist in the band we call Neon Nights, Jared, posed to the group chat the other day, hey, we haven't talked about this since Caleb has joined the band. I'm the most recent member, but I'd really like to write some songs together. And it started piquing my interest, and I started thinking about, well, I've got a bunch of different songs, and some of them really fit the sound that we've developed on stage. It's really interesting because, I've struggled for so many years to find my sound as an individual singer-songwriter, but with the band, because it's the sum of all your parts, it comes a lot more naturally. And I've found that really to be a beautiful kind of sense of feeling out and discovery that happens a lot more naturally and a lot less deliberately than, carving out your own sound or your own brand the way that, as solo artists, we're often pushed to do in this day and age.
No, 100%. And, one of the things I was thinking about earlier today, knowing you were going to come on, is you're definitely someone who, as a solo artist, has definitely played with a lot of genre, played with a lot of hybrids. And, that is something that I think a lot of creative people want to do.
Absolutely.
But when you get into the idea of bringing different pieces into the fold, that does bring a different energy. Yeah. When you've got different people with their own unique approach and just synthesizing it together, that's definitely a really cool thing about music.
Yeah, and it shows that music, when it at its best, is really the collective minds coming together and kind of communicating with each other. As much as, in my music, I like to bounce between genres. It's a very almost selfish pursuit. I almost want to bounce between genres to prove to myself that I can, more than it is that I feel that I can do one genre very well versus another. And, as a solo artist, a lot of times, especially if you're a vocalist, the packaging is everything is tied together by your voice. So yes. You can switch genres, but as long as you have that voice that a listener can identify as the through line, you can kind of get away with it. But when you're working with real live artists in real time, other musicians, you kind of get what you all bring to the fold in real time, which could be different from one session to the next.
Yeah. So I am curious about before we go into the recent debacle, perhaps, tell me more about your previous pursuits in like sync licensing or licensing in general for your music, and what sort of brought you to that, and what are your thoughts on kind of that scene as a whole?
Yeah, it's good timing for that question, because coming into this time last year, I would say kind of at the turn of the new year, coming into 2024, I was really just at the beginning of really taking music as a serious career for the first time in my life. And I'm 31 years old now, but at the time, I had kind of gone through life playing music, but never really sure exactly what I would do with it.
Yeah.
I always felt like I was an overqualified amateur, but not yet dipping my toes into professionalism with it. So I was really honestly just trying to make an album and figure out how to fund it with music itself. And I was, doing a lot of research. By accident, I was looking up a Latin horn sample because I wanted to sample something for a song I was putting together for this hypothetical album that I had no means of funding. And I came across a producer on a site called the Free Music Archive. His name is Ketsa. He's based out in the UK. And over the months, we developed a relationship. He licensed a bunch of his instrumentals to me, which has allowed me to cross even more genres than I could have ever imagined. And he is very much embedded in the royalty-free world and somewhat adjacent to the sync world. So he sort of brought me into it, and I kind of almost forced myself into being his mentee. He really has provided so much awesome wisdom and coaching that has really kind of shown me that sync is a viable path that actually makes a lot of sense if you're trying to cross a lot of genres. So I really found my way in through Ketsa, and I have this book, How to Make It in the New Music Industry by Ari Herstand. And that really took me to the next level just by really informing me of all the different ways you can kind of get into sync. So that's really about how it started, and it's just been a learning process ever since.
Yeah. Personally, that is something that my discography would probably lend itself to, yet I had not taken any serious action at pursuing it down the road. That's definitely something I would be looking at as well. Now, recently you had a sync deal, and it didn't pan out the way you expected. Would you mind sort of elaborating on that?
Yeah, I think this is a great place to do that. And it saved me the time. I was going to, write up a blog post, but I don't have a formal blog or anything. And I really do think that this is important to get out there, because I have quite a long track record in the business world, and I'm definitely older than a lot of the independent artists getting started these days. So I wanted to share sort of a negative but good learning experience that I had in the world of sync, where I've been finding what we call briefs or requests for specific songs built for a specific use case, like in a film or an ad. One was Ketsa, who I just mentioned, his company, and his company actually is taking from another company that runs through Patreon called the Sync Ops, where they kind of send specific briefs through Ketsa's company, and then they have a bunch of their own briefs. And so that's how I was kind of building sync tracks and finding places or opportunities for sync. But kind of downstream, our friend Kid Lightbulbs, he had made a post on Threads recently just talking about how he had started to put some of his older material on Bandcamp, which prompted me to do so. It was something that I'd thought about for many years. I had a bunch of stuff on Bandcamp many years ago that I deleted and kind of wanted to hide. Not long after that, maybe 3 weeks, after putting almost everything I've ever made on Bandcamp, I was approached in my emails by a guy by the name of Elliot Stutzer asking about using my music for an ad campaign, which, I was a little skeptical, because Bandcamp in the mailer actually says beware of frauds and scams and all that. So they do their part to kind of raise your eyebrows. But, I did a ton of internet sleuthing. This Elliot Stutzer guy is a real guy, real guitar professor in Anchorage, Alaska. They're one of one. and their website looked legit. They claimed their client was Pico Interactive, which I would later find out is sort of the ByteDance competitor to Meta's virtual reality headsets. So legit company. And they said that they wanted 4 songs for an ad campaign about an artist or young artists who feel like they're in inconquerable circumstances, showing them that they can conquer whatever it is they're going through and fulfill their dreams and live out their dreams. It was really on brand for exactly what my music was doing. The 4 songs they chose from my catalog were all from an album called Community, where the album cover is a guy with a virtual reality headset. It's a central theme in the album. So it very much felt legit. It felt like somebody had found my music, had a very specific use case for my music that aligns with the exact branding of the music and exact thematic kind of tones of the songs themselves. But it started to get a little fishy as we started talking through it. The contract looked great, and I'm very fortunate. My cousin's an attorney, so I would look through everything with him, and I would just definitely throw in the disclaimer here. Do not do anything like this without an attorney, because it's absolutely pivotal. If you don't have an attorney formally that you have that you work with formally and pay, reach out to a family member, a friend. That's what I did. I don't have a formal attorney, but I reached out to my cousin, who's a prosecutor. He understands a lot more than I do. He said for the most part it checked out. He just couldn't find anything about the CEO of the company, who claimed to be Greg Young. And he couldn't find out very much about the company, and he felt that the contract was too artist-friendly to be true.
So basically what happened here is an intricate social engineering. It's basically a few steps ahead of those DMs you might get where they're like, hey, I checked out your song so-and-so. It was really cool. Yeah. I love the lyrics, even though it's an instrumental. But this was a little more... It almost feels like human, right? Where it's like they were able to detect the thematic content of your music. It's almost as if they actually listened to your music, perhaps. And
it was shockingly specific. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's scary. That's very scary.
Yeah. There were certainly yellow flags, and that's where it was really nice to have an attorney, because I'm at this point emotionally invested, right?
Yes.
There's this campaign for a virtual reality headset that matches perfectly with my music, and they want my music, and they want to hand me $4,000. I played 7 gigs last month. It would take me 28 gigs to make that same money, as long as they're tipping well.
Yeah.
So 28 gigs is like it's a ton. So I was really excited, and through my business experience, I certainly had some guard up, but everything felt very legit. And then when we saw the contract, essentially what they wanted to do was they claimed, because of past lawsuits, the client prefers to pay the artist directly, and the artist then reimburses essentially the agency for their work, booking content creators and generating these campaigns themselves, so on.
So that flag is getting a little more red. Once you start redistributing funds and, paying people back, you see that a lot with work opportunities. So at this point, I imagine your guard has gone even more up.
It has. Yeah. It definitely has gone up. But I'm still somewhat of a risk taker. So I say, okay, they're doing a direct deposit, so let's see what happens. I sign a contract, and knowing fully well, if it's a scam, this contract is just basically a bar napkin. It doesn't mean anything.
Null and void.
Exactly. No, you can't. A contract is only as good as it can be enforced. And if it can't be enforced because the people turn out to not be real people, well, so be it. But really where the alarm starts going off fully is a couple of days later. They say the client has a problem with their direct deposit and they prefer to send over a check. Now, unfortunately for these scammers, I have read a lot about recent check frauds of where they'll say, oh, we're going to send you $200. They send you $2,000. Oops, typo. Can you reimburse us the $1,800? And then up to 90 days later, that check bounces because fraud takes a long time to identify by your bank. So you're out $1,800 and you never made the money you thought you made. So I'm already kind of super on edge. I'm starting to get nervous now because I'm worried that this is probably a scam and they have my account and routing numbers. But the real kind of caveat that I want everybody that ever is paid in a check to take away from this is the check gave a piece of information that I didn't have previously. The check put the formal business name, Pico Interactive LLC, and it gave an address to Lowell, Massachusetts. Now, Pico Interactive is not an LLC. It's an INC owned by ByteDance. There's a Pico Interactive with a K, and often typos are the red herring and these kinds of things. But they're a third-party reseller of vintage Nintendo products. So it's not that company, and it's not the ByteDance-owned company. And the address went back to a company that makes supply lines kind of materials that are used to make bread. Wow. So not even close. At this point, they are also upping the urgency. You need to send us the wire transfer. We have people coming into the studio. They're making up every rule, and the number keeps changing. First, it's, you need to send us 3,000. Well, if you can't do 3,000, it's 25. If you can't, well, oh, now you can do 3,000. Can you do 35? You know, the number keeps changing. And at this point, it's full blown a scam. But the reason why I ever had any ounce of faith in them is because they were using the alias of Elliot Stutzer, who looks like a very reputable guitar teacher in Anchorage, who, you know, from just doing some research, it's very possible that a guy like this could moonlight as, working as a music supervisor for an ad agency, especially in a small little area like Anchorage, Alaska.
Right.
So I DM'd him on Instagram. He actually just got back to me and said he's aware of the scam, but I wanted to make him aware. Somebody's using your identity to scam artists, and he is aware. He's trying to take it down, but really, I'm so grateful for the timing of this talk that we're having. Is I wanted to go through every single step and kind of talk about all the things that I picked up on, and no matter how emotionally invested I was, I still kind of retained that sense of distrust, because while we've seen a lot of progress in artist empowerment and the lowering of barriers to entry into being an independent musician, there are still predators out there that are trying to capitalize on people's desire to make it, capitalize on people's ambition, and capitalize on people's emotion, because no matter what you do, you can't remove the emotion from music.
No. And you can't remove the personal attachment people have to music, no matter what some musicians might say. I think it's true that many of us at some point in our lives might have had that dream that someday we were like a star of some sort, inspired by musical icons of the past that shaped our lives as musicians. So even if you are at a more mature state of your musical career, something that appeals to your sense of career progress is always tempting. And also, I think there is this sort of confluence of rapidly escalating technological advances in scams, amongst other things. I think even like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe less, the baseline for being scammed online would have required relatively low digital literacy, right? Yeah. Where you send someone a Visa gift card or whatever. But I think at this point, just a little bit of clever social engineering, or maybe just clicking through the wrong email that was spoofed, there are so many opportunities for people to be scammed. And although it's by no means exclusive to music, I think it's really kind of a kick while you're down in music, because we know it's so hard to make a living in music.
It is.
And even publicly prominent musicians who have record deals or established reputations are still kind of just getting by. And, for opportunities that seem real to just sort of end up being a total scam that somebody took the time to make, it's really disheartening. And that's why I thank you for like kind of going into depth about it, because this will be really informative for people.
Yeah. And I think it's ever more challenging to spot that it's scam too. One thing that I've taken so many, phishing trainings just from my day job over the years. And one of the major things to look out for are typos and, just English that doesn't English, so to speak. But with ChatGPT, those days are gone. It's so easy. And, with Google Voice, like anyone can impersonate a number anywhere, not to pick on anyone or anything, but, there is a tendency for scams often to originate in Nigeria. And the one person who had called me, taking the name Greg Young, I presume he was taking the identity of somebody who is on Social Security for disability. It's the only Greg Young in Anchorage, Alaska that I could find anywhere on the internet. It's just a LinkedIn account that says SSI disability. So probably somebody that can't defend his identity.
Yeah.
And when I picked up the phone, at first I couldn't place the accent, but the next time I heard it, I was like, I get it. If the voice doesn't match the name or the identity, it's very easy to kind of rationalize that in your head. Like I said, the first time I heard the voice, I was like, that's a curious accent, but I've never met anyone from Alaska. So you kind of gaslight yourself.
Right.
And then, as the ruse starts to kind of dissipate, you start to hear the facts. And I just hope that others can kind of be very savvy if put in this position, because it's getting harder and harder to spot, because things like ChatGPT will make a lot of the obvious errors go away. And who knows what kind of AI they might have used to generate that fake ad campaign, because that is as legit a campaign as a campaign would sound. I went to school for advertising and it sounded right.
Yeah, that's the other kind of element to remember here, is that if you need that sort of portfolio from the scammer to demonstrate credibility just on first glance, what it used to would have taken would have been much more complex, or just you would have had to steal something and then put it on your own site. Now, you could just whip something up with a generator and it looks fine, to your point.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's really important for anyone in the creative fields, anyone who, or I would even expand that, like anyone who's trying to be sort of like an independent business person, or like basically anyone who's trying to make content, or anyone who's just operating independently and trying to make a name for themselves, that there's countless sharks out there who would just like to take a bite from you, and you got to be real careful. And if anybody is coming to you with an opportunity that almost seems too good to be true, it doesn't mean it's not true, but it means you have to start with vigilance, as you did, and scrutiny. I think that's a really important PSA for everyone out there.
Yeah, I'm glad to have the forum to do it. I know you've gotten super well connected on Threads, and that's definitely where I've been sharing it primarily. But I'm just trying to find more avenues to share this message, because I would hate for anyone to be financially devastated by this and then emotionally devastated by this. Even though they didn't get $1 out of me because I was able to identify the scam before sending anything out, it was a gut punch. It felt cruel, and it felt like a violation,
It was, yeah.
I had to go to the bank 12 hours ago to change my account and routing number, and they said you only get 2 or 3 of these, so next time might want to start a second account for specifically these kinds of dealings.
Right. Well, yeah, definitely those are lessons to be taken, and that's going to be really good for people to hear. And I'm glad that you sort of came out of it without losing too much skin. If we were to discuss some other things, what is sort of in your mind right now when it comes to music? Because many musicians do think about music often in the back of their head. Like in your recent pursuits, is there anything novel going on in your mind?
I definitely always have recording on my mind because I have set a totally arbitrary but very lofty goal of releasing a song every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And there's definitely ups and downs with that. Initially it was just kind of this awe and wonder of, wow, I can make songs in my room and put them out and do it with this unbelievable frequency. And it was fun and it was awesome. But recently, it has become, and this is purely a phase, but this phase has sort of started to feel like not so much a chore, but just a little bit overwhelmed because I certainly I've written so many different songs. It's really just like, what do I record next? Because I have, so many options. At first, it was, I write a song, I record a song, but then, the writing kind of gets ahead much faster than the recording because it's a much shorter process. Yes. And now I have lots of different people that I'm very fortunate for asking to collaborate and reaching out to collaborate. And it's really just a matter of like, where do I go next? So I think what I'm struggling with is almost just was kind of tied in with my New Year's resolution. I wanted to go with the flow and kind of be able to listen to my environment and go where the calling is. And at this moment, and perhaps just because of maybe admittedly a little bit of burnout from 7 gigs this month and 4 songs recorded, I think I'm just kind of in a pattern of, what's the next? And how do I recapture kind of the almost like childish wonder that I had when I started this? It's about a year ago.
That's something that I've had to tap into in the past in terms of having a rut creatively or career-wise where I'm like, okay, if whatever I've been doing most recently isn't quite feeling like a creative high or like a creative peak, go back to the basics. What was I thinking about back in 2006 when I was using FL Studio and making beats with a little MIDI keyboard? What was going on in my head back then? What was I thinking about? And I've had several times where I've just tried to go back to that root. And it's not necessarily a cure-all for all of your musical issues, but it's definitely like a good perspective. And also, just taking care of your own mental well-being and like taking time to do other things like get exercise, read, just get out there a little bit, be loose. Music does well when you're loose, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think for me, exercise is such a key component. I always find that I give my best vocal performances after a run or after not a super heavy lift, but like kind of more of a, aerobic type of lift.
Yeah.
Because it really loosens your body up. I actually had a fantastic vocal coach when I was living in New York, Kevin Michael Murphy. He really started his journey into a very physical approach to singing, where any tightness or muscle spasm in your body could disrupt your voice, because it's almost like putting a cherry into a flute. Your air is constricted, so the tone of your instrument's going to be constricted. So we did a lot of physical exercises with band, stretches, that kind of thing, and a lot of breathing exercises. That always stuck with me, that your body is your instrument when you're singing, and any tightness and impingements will be directly tied to your tone.
100%. And if you're let's say a lead vocalist or a dancer or whatever, just being loosened up is like going to add something significant to your stage presence. So yeah, your body and music are things that do need to be in sync. I mean, you can compose on a couch, I guess, but if you're doing anything dynamic or live, being physically into it is necessary, and you need some endurance for that.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's always really just been a balance for me. I grew up, and my schedule from a very early age was from 7:30 or so, I go to school, and then it's about 6 or 7 hours of thinking. And then I'd come home from school and I'd practice the piano for an hour, and then I'd eat, and then I'd go to baseball practice or a baseball game. And then I'd come home, clean up a bed, and then you do it all over again the next day. And so my routine was built very much around like the trinity of mind in school, body at playing baseball, and soul, so to speak, out of the music. So I've always kind of tried to keep that, but it's almost like that habit tries to keep me. Life kind of goes one way or another. And I think in a hyper-industrial society like we live in, specialization is sort of what we're all pushed towards, and you're kind of forced into one or the other. But I've found the greatest liberty through integration of all three. And I'm at my best when I'm exercising 5 times a week or so, playing music or encountering music in some form or another every day. And then, my day job or writing or whatever mental activity it is. My day job is consumer research. So it is very much like a mental thing, which I'm very grateful for. I've built a career around kind of a thinking, almost quasi-academic field. So, it's really helped me to maintain that sort of trinity.
That's very good, and it will be inspiring for others to hear too, because I think we all suffer with imbalances from time to time. I mean, personally, I can provide the anecdote. Starting this podcast, it didn't start in 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I've been putting a little time into it, and I haven't really been doing too much else. You know what I mean? So there is a degree of imbalance, and I'm aware of that. I expect to sort of turn on other activities very soon, but you want to go all in. You want to be passionate, because music, a lot of it is just passion, right? This melody in your head, this harmony in your heart, and you just want to figure it out and dive deep into it, stay up all night. But if you burn yourself out, you're just going to lose that steam. And
definitely,
to be a creative in the world we live in today, you definitely need balance, but also for your well-being, which also matters in its own right. You need balance. And I think that's probably a good place to leave this discussion. So, Caleb, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your insights, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.
Thank you for having me, John. I wish you the best as you get started on this podcast. It seems like you've got a whole lot of awesome people reaching out to be on this, but whenever you want me back, I would be thrilled to come back and keep this discussion going.
Thanks for listening to Malmborg Report. If you enjoyed this episode, follow me on social media at It's John Malmborg, and subscribe to Malmborg Report on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Want to stay in the loop? Sign up for my email list at johnmalmborg.com. And if you'd like to support the show directly, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Malmborg Report. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.